Well, welcome, Dr. Martin, to the Tennessean. We're very happy to have you here today to spend some time with you to explore some of the most pressing issues in Tennessee and to learn a little bit about you as well. So let's dive right in.
Sure, looking forward to it.
Very good. The first question that I'm going to ask is a question that we ask virtually all of those who are running for public office here in Tennessee. And it's something that's very important to us at the Tennessean as an institution, and that is your stance on civility and how you might lead through it, restore it in our state during a time when there's a lot of political turmoil, and it's tougher and tougher to come by.
Yeah, civility, especially in politics, is something that's very important to me. I think that it's incumbent upon all of us seeking office to turn the volume down and to focus on issues so that we can move our communities forward. I think there's been a tendency recently to treat politics like a team sport. There's a red team and a blue team, and there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. And I think that's detrimental for our country. I think it's detrimental for our state. And I think it's important that we step away from that. I don't think either party has all the answers. And it's important for us to work together to find solutions together.
Very good. A part of that as well has been our support for civic education. Governor Lee has been behind that. How might you and an administration of yours address civic education in Tennessee?
Yeah, I think it's important for children across the state to be educated about how government works, how it touches their lives. And I think it's also important that we are truthful and honest when we're teaching American history, for example. And so I think that we need to free teachers to do that and not threaten them with their jobs for teaching American history as it happened or having them edit their libraries for a specific ideology. I think it's important that we expose them to the world as it is, and I think that strengthens our democracy.
Thank you. So let's pivot, and that was a good point to do so, to education, one of the most pressing issues in the state. Where are we right now in Tennessee, and where should we be?
Governor Lee, in my opinion, has waged a war on public education his entire time in office, and there's evidence for that. He's been complicit in underfunding public education for years, and we were in the bottom 40s in the nation when it came to per pupil funding, and that has had a detrimental impact on the quality of the product that's been delivered. He then took that crisis and blamed our teachers for it. It's not their fault. They're doing the best they can in their under-resourced environment. And unfortunately, he's done other things like politicize our school boards, by allowing our school boards to be Republican or Democrat. That has nothing to do with taking care of our kids or teaching them reading, writing, or arithmetic, and everything to do with power, influence, and control. So I think that's bad for public education. And I think it's bad for public education that he's willing to override local school districts when they make decisions about how their schools should be managed. He's put in place a non-elected board of bureaucrats to come in and override local school boards. So, I think all of that is an attack on public education. Even with the additional funds that he's put towards public education, we're still behind Alabama, we're still behind Kentucky when it comes to per pupil funding. So I think it's very important that we do a few things. First of all, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to fund public education, recognize that it buoys all of our communities, whether or not you have children or not, whether or not you have children in public schools or not. It buoys our economy, it buoys our democracy, and it needs to be supported.
So you're clearly a big supporter of public education. There are many parents who believe that they should have a choice in education. Can you explain your position regarding charter schools?
Yeah, absolutely. Governor Lee, what he's tried to do is to bring in charter schools from Hillsdale, and you will have heard about this. This is the organization headed by Larry Arnn, who came to town and basically said that anybody could be a teacher. He said that our teachers were trained at the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges in the country. And in that moment, when the governor had an opportunity to speak out and defend our teachers and defend our educators, he was silent while the community in that meeting laughed and mocked. And I think that lack of leadership was stunning. And Governor Lee was given an opportunity to walk back and distance himself from those comments before that story went live, But he failed to do so because that's what he thinks, in my opinion, about public educators and about public education. And so, I think when he's trying to bring charter schools to your community, whether or not you want them, that is wrong. I'm absolutely anti-voucher. Vouchers are weapons to defund public education, plain and simple, and we need to make sure they're not a part of our education mix.
So how does the right mix under your administration look?
The right mix for me is fully funding traditional public schools. I am not going to come into a community and say you can't have a charter school if you want one, because again, I think that decisions are best made at the local level by elected officials in that community. However, I will be very vocal about the fact that the charter school experiment, for the most part, has been a failed experiment in the state of Tennessee, and we need to invest in traditional public schools. You want to talk about choice. What choice do the kids who are left behind have in traditional public schools when those thousands of dollars are going out to private schools? What choice do the students who are left behind have when millions and millions of our state dollars are going to line Governor Lee's buddy's pocket up at Hillsdale?
So, to critics who might say, we did things a certain way in the state for a long time and it wasn't working. Governor Lee is shaking things up. He's trying a revolutionary approach. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would respond that the system is delivering the results that the funding provides. We have thousands of open teacher positions. We dramatically underpay our teachers. We devalue them by not speaking up when someone comes to town and criticizes them. We make their jobs harder with regulations about the content of their in-class libraries that they probably paid for with their own checks. We attack them on multiple fronts. We threaten their jobs when they teach American history as it happened. And so it's in this environment that education is not delivering the results that we want. So I say let's support our teachers. Let's give them the resources they need to be successful. And I think the results will be different.
How much should Tennessee be paying its teachers?
That's a conversation we need to have. I mean, we need to look at standards across the region, and we need to pay them a salary commensurate with the work that they're doing and with others in the region.
So let's pivot to another very topical item in the news right now, and that's abortion. So when I talked to Governor Lee, the Supreme Court had not yet made its ruling. Of course, it has made a ruling, and so we are where we are today. Tennessee is a new law banning abortion has gone into effect, and that is the law of the land. What would you do if you were in office to address abortion?
Here's what I know about abortion restrictions. Abortion restrictions, they don't stop abortions. They just stop the safe ones. Abortion restrictions don't stop abortions for everyone. They just stop abortions in this environment for people who can't afford to travel to another state where the services are offered. We are attacking marginalized communities in this state with our abortion restrictions. And let me tell you this too, the trigger law that was passed by the Radical General Assembly and Governor Lee is really radical. 80% of Tennesseans, regardless of political ideology, understand that not having an exception for the life and safety of a pregnant woman is wrong. Not having an exception for a child who's the victim of a sexual crime is wrong. Not having an exception for rape or incest is wrong. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to be locking up, potentially, physicians for fulfilling their oath to provide life-saving services to women in this community. And it's already happening. It's already happening that the law is having detrimental impacts on people. I know of patients who've had to be transported to other states to get the care that their doctors deem necessary for medical reasons. I know of cases where care has been delayed by hours while ethics committees and legal committees are getting together to decide what physicians know should be done to take care of their patients. And that's an injustice, and it needs to be changed.
So is it fair to say clarifying the law would be a priority?
I would say more than clarifying it. I would say it needs to be repealed. I feel very strongly that, I'll say it like this. I've been to all 95 counties. I've been to thousands and thousands of meet and greets. I've met thousands of Tennesseans. I've never met one who wants to see one more abortion take place in the state of Tennessee. But I know thousands and thousands of people who understand that government does not belong in that very personal decision when a woman, her family, and her practitioner are making decisions about her body, period.
Of course, healthcare is an area in which you have an expertise, and I believe it is that expertise that helped lead you to the decision to run for governor. Could you walk us through that story a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been a critical care doctor. That means I work in the intensive care unit of hospitals exclusively. I don't have an office practice. And it's that experience working in two different areas that brought me to government, or wanting to be in government. First of all, I worked at Meharry Medical College, the nation's oldest historically black medical college, for a little over 7 years. And as part of that, I provided clinical services at Nashville General Hospital. So I've worked for the majority of my professional life, taking care of folks who are in need, taking care of patients who are working 2 and 3 jobs and still unable to afford health care insurance, taking care of our prisoners in the Tennessee Department of Corrections Systems and our Metro employees. And I know what it's like to sit in an exam room and have a patient look me in the eyes and say, you know what, I'm going to die rather than get treatment for this lung tumor or this medical problem because I don't want to saddle my family with medical debt. That is happening in Tennessee right now. Every day people are making life and death decisions because of lack of access to health care. And this is happening while we're sitting on billions in a rainy day fund. This is happening while we're turning our backs on billions and billions in Medicaid expansion money that we could use to decrease the number of uninsured by half overnight in this state if we had a governor with political courage. But for me, the straw that broke the camel's back that made it very clear that I wanted to get more involved was working during the COVID crisis and seeing more than 400 human beings die on my watch. I carried the weight of those poor people around with me every single day. They died of COVID. And in the moments of pain that we felt, in the moments of suffering that we felt, in the moments of suffering that I observed in my patients and their families, we were never met with leadership from Governor Lee, not once. We were met with denial. We were met with threats to defund the health department. We were met with silence while people in the General Assembly were pushing ivermectin, horse pills on people. We were met with a lack of leadership when they fired Dr. Shelley Fiskus, the chief vaccine officer in the state of Tennessee in the middle of a pandemic. That lack of leadership brought me to the table, and the lack of leadership is pervasive across the enterprise.
How would you have led differently during the COVID crisis?
That's a really difficult question for a number of reasons. First of all, COVID has evolved so much in the last couple of years, so it's difficult to go back and put on your March or April 2020 glasses to answer this question. But I think the guiding thread throughout this moving target for me would have been using data to make decisions and not politics, because the data was telling us in March of 2020 and or in early 2020 that masks decreased transmission. Data was telling us that we needed to use precautions, being around one another until we had preventatives and treatments that were data-driven or proven. And so I would have listened to the scientists and not to the politicians in making recommendations.
So I'm pretty certain that the Lee administration would say that they did use data, but came to different conclusions from that data. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, I think is how the saying goes. And, Governor Lee, in my opinion, was too interested in his political reality than in the reality that was taking place on the ground, and it was costing people their lives.
What would you consider to be the governor's biggest failure during his time in office?
I would say the governor's biggest opportunity for improvement would be to stand for something. For goodness sakes, stand for something. And let's take a couple of examples. Truth in sentencing, for example, came across his desk. This is a piece of legislation that requires 100% time served for certain offenders. The governor did not think that was a good idea. He actually released a statement and said, it doesn't decrease recidivism. It's not going to save the taxpayers money. It's not going to help us with our overcrowded prison population. And yet, he let that become law without his signature because he didn't have the courage to stand up for his convictions. And let's think back to when being unhoused became a felony in the state of Tennessee. He also thought that was a bad idea, but again, He didn't have the courage to cross his own political party, and so that became law without his signature as well. And so, there are just many examples of where he doesn't stand for anything. He blows in the political winds, and that's bad for us.
So I want to follow up on criminal justice reform, but first, I would like you to tell me what you think his biggest success in office has been.
Governor Lee did sign a piece of legislation that increased transparency in campaign finance funding, and I thought that was a good move.
Okay, so back to criminal justice reform. That has been an area of emphasis for the governor. He talked about it when he ran for office initially 4 years ago, and he's continuously talked about it since. Has he succeeded?
I haven't seen a lot of movement when it comes to criminal justice reform, to be honest with you. I would like to see more use of diversionary courts, particularly with non-violent offenders, to keep them out of the system and give them an opportunity to make themselves whole. So obviously with any adjudication process, you need to make the victim of a crime whole, but with their consent, we need to also look at what happened in the perpetrator's life to take them to this point and hopefully remedy that so that we can get them back into society and contributing.
Okay. So for us as a news organization, obviously First Amendment, press freedom, but all of the 5 freedoms enumerated in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution are something that we are particularly interested in, and that translates for us into openness in government. It's something that we seek and demand at all levels of government, federal, state, and local. What would that look like in your administration?
I'm determined to have a transparent administration, and this is my background in medicine, informing how I would handle government. When I talk to patients on a daily basis about life-threatening conditions, I feel like it's my job to give the families and the patients as much information as possible so that we can make decisions together. This is what we need to be doing in government. It's the same approach. We're dealing with life and death. We're dealing with people's lives and prosperity. We absolutely need to make sure they have all the information in front of them.
Now, how do you ensure that confidential discussions, things that might be a little sensitive if they were disclosed, you're able to have those types of frank conversations? The governor has been citing a concept known as deliberative privilege, which has not yet been established as law in the state, but they've been citing that in some of their conversations. Is that something that you would do as well?
I'd have to look into that more, and honestly, I'd have to seek legal counsel. But I can tell you my overriding philosophy here is that there needs to be transparency in government, especially when money is spent, when money is appropriated. I do think it's important for the governor to be able to solicit a variety of types of opinions, and people need to be able to speak freely to give those opinions. And I think that's really important for any decision-making process, is that you understand the universe of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Let's revert to healthcare for a moment. In the news recently has been a discussion of gender-affirming care. So I'll ask you directly first, do you think minors in Tennessee should be able to receive non-reversible gender-affirming care?
Here's what I think. The government needs to stay out of the doctor's office when families are making decisions about what's best for them, period. And right now, what's happening with Governor Lee and radicals on his side attacking trans youth, I think is deplorable. I think that it is attacking a community that is already marginalized. It's attacking a community that has a high rate of depression and suicidality at baseline. And when you have this type of heated rhetoric coming from the chief executive of the state, it empowers other people to hate as well. And so, again, this is consistent with my notion that government needs to stay out of the medical decision-making process and let parents and families decide what is best for themselves.
In Tennessee, over the last couple of decades, we've seen a real decline in the number of Democrats, particularly outside of Memphis and Nashville. In fact, I think it's fair to say in some communities, Democrat is almost a toxic brand. Why do you think that has happened?
I guess I would disagree with the premise of the question. I mean, I think Democrats are still out there. I think that we need to be more effective at getting everyone out to the voting booth. I can't explain exactly how we got here, but I think I have the path for getting out. And that is, again, walking away from this notion that the only way to prosperity in the state of Tennessee is by playing a red or blue team sport. Instead, we're going out, and urban Tennessee, rural Tennessee, east, west, middle, it doesn't matter. We talk to everybody about kitchen table issues that matter to everybody. Access to a great, free public education that stays public. Access to health care that doesn't break the bank so that working families can go out and be healthy. And we talk about infrastructure, getting the right infrastructure in place at the right time for every community, including high-speed internet from Memphis to Mountain City. Those are the things that we're talking about that transcend a party. Those are the things that are going to win the election for us.
So at a national level, some of the traditional, so to speak, critiques of the Democratic Party would be that it's a party that wants to tax, it's a party that wants big government. Where do you fit in on that, do you think?
So, I mean, already several times in this discussion this afternoon, I've talked to you about how we want to keep government out of the doctor's office. We are the ones that want to keep the government from coming in and telling your school board, the state government, what it has to do to survive. We are the ones who are for local control of your community. We don't want the state coming in to supersede your metro council or your city council when they make a decision about what's best for your community. So I think that narrative that you described is inaccurate in this political environment. The governor is so radical on so many of his stances. He's given us room on all these issues.
Infrastructure, you mentioned that also earlier. What are the most pressing infrastructure issues facing the state?
So, we've got billions of dollars coming down from the federal government for the infrastructure bill that needs to be appropriated. Like every community has a road or a bridge or a water system that needs work, and I'm committed to working with governments across the state to identify and prioritize those projects. But I think the tie that binds what I hear everywhere I go, particularly out in rural Tennessee, is that we need affordable high-speed internet. We've been in the 34th, I believe, in the nation when it comes to deployment of high-speed connections per capita, and that has, it's not just YouTube and Facebook anymore and Twitter, and as my 15-year-old tells me, TikTok. It's a utility for businesses, and so we absolutely have to make that a priority so that we can create prosperity in rural Tennessee.
So, how do we make it a priority? It's easy to say,
sure,
we make it a priority.
Sure. So there's a number of things we can do. First of all, we can ease the regulatory environment so that it's easier for cooperatives to provide roll fiber out to communities, provide that service. We can direct federal dollars that are coming down from the infrastructure bill to these causes specifically. And earmark them and make sure that there's a fair process. I mean, the governor is starting to make some moves in this area, but it's only after we've been shining a light on it for a year and calling him to task because of his lack of leadership in this area.
Okay. Infrastructure, does that include a shiny new stadium for the Tennessee Titans?
This is a difficult question, so well done. But here's the thing. For the Nashville community, Nashville needs to be very deliberate and look at what's the cost of upgrading the current stadium versus what is the cost of putting in the stadium of tomorrow. And that's a decision that needs to be made locally. I don't think that the state of Tennessee should be putting in $500 million to finance a roof at a time when we have teachers that are underpaid, at a time when we have 800,000 Tennesseans who don't have health insurance. I just think we have other priorities that need to be, that supersede the stadium right now.
Do you think that's a straight either or? In other words, isn't it possible to have that stadium and fund those other things?
Well, here's the thing. I think that having the stadium is independent of the state, kicking in $500 million for a roof. Nashville can work with the business owners and work with the other entities in the community to find a way to finance it if they decide that that's what they want to do. But it's not the state's responsibility to come in and make the deal happen for them when we have so many other priorities.
So let's talk Nashville a little bit. We're sitting in Nashville right now. Nashville is the capital.
Sure.
And Nashville is where a lot of people come from out of state to spend time. It's an economic driver. There's a several-year wait for a crane right now. It's boom times in Nashville. But Nashville has had a history of strained relations at times with state government, particularly the legislature. How does an administration under your leadership work with the state legislature moving ahead?
We absolutely need to respect local control. We need to respect local decision-making authority. This General Assembly and this governor has been complicit in it, is vindictive. If you don't do what they want, they are going to inflict a price on you, or they're going to try to. That's not who we are. I don't think that's the way.
So could you cite an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, when it's not come to pass yet, but there have been threats made by the General Assembly because Nashville has not wanted to host the Republican National Convention, and some of the threats that I heard reported in the media included, perhaps withdrawing funding for the stadium roof or for the East Bank development, and so this hostage-taking approach to government, I think, is wrong.
So playing devil's advocate
Sure.
here, why shouldn't Nashville, which is a hub of people from all over the world, any day of the year, want to and be aggressive about getting the RNC in the future?
I mean, I would talk to the Metro Council. I think they absolutely have the power to make the decision if they feel like it's going to be disruptive, if they feel like it's going to be a security risk for our citizenry. They absolutely should have the authority to make that decision.
The folks in rural Tennessee is largely a rural state. If they're asking what they're going to get if they vote for you, how do you answer that question?
Thank you for that, because I want to tell you that I think past campaigns on the Democratic side perhaps have not spent as much time shining a light on the issues in rural Tennessee as we have. We understand that the path to the governor's office goes through rural Tennessee. And so that's why we have a prescription that includes creating an environment of prosperity there. Look, the governor wants to tell you, look, we've got low unemployment, and we've got this great economy that's the envy of the whole country. But if you go out to rural Tennessee, it's withering on the vine. 1 in 5 of our counties doesn't have an emergency room. 1 in 3 of our counties doesn't even have an OBGYN doctor on call at night. We lead the nation in medical bankruptcies. We lead the nation in hospital closures per capita. All of that dramatically and disproportionately impacts rural Tennessee. And when there's no access to health care, the jobs leave, and so they are economically stagnant. And so I think we are going to focus on great K through 12 education as well as workforce development. We are going to focus on bringing health care back to rural Tennessee with Medicaid expansion. We are going to focus on bringing high-speed internet at a reasonable price to every zip code in the state of Tennessee. That's going to create an environment where businesses come to town and grow. That's going to create prosperity.
Your expertise, virtual healthcare, that has been touted a lot by a lot of people at the national level, state level, as perhaps the most promising solution to the challenges facing rural Tennessee in terms of accessing at least some of the healthcare that they need. Is it the real deal? Does it serve a valuable need?
This is another lesson that we learned from COVID. Being able to flex to a telehealth model is extremely important, and it's a way to leverage scarce resources in far-flung places in this state. And so when we talk about, for example, access to mental health, which people recognize across the state is an issue, we talk about being able to deliver that service via telemedicine. And to do that, you've got to have that high-speed internet connection. So I absolutely think the promise of telehealth is either here or near. There's also some regulatory things that need to happen from a state perspective to make it fiscally possible for physicians to provide that service. And so we need to make sure that we live in an environment where there's parity, and so that practices can be compensated for the care they provide over telemodels.
So I've been asking you a lot of questions, and I want to pause for a moment, make sure I'm giving you a chance to say all the things that you want to say, not just responding to my questions. Are we missing any of the big themes you want to make sure that you get out to the electorate?
No, I appreciate that. I don't know if you're going to ask about cannabis later in this talk, but I would like to cover cannabis for both medical use and adult use, if that's permissible.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think that legalizing cannabis from a medical perspective, cannabis as medicine, is really a no-brainer at this point. And I know Governor Lee was asked about that in 2018, and he said that he would look at the data. He's subsequently come out against it, which tells me that he did not look at the data. This is another area where there's a lack of leadership, because the data tells us that there's a set of diagnoses where offering medical cannabis is the right thing to do, but unfortunately we can't offer that to our patients as they can in more than a dozen other states across the country. In terms of cannabis for adult use, or also called recreational cannabis, I think we need to look to Colorado. Colorado is a state with 1.5 million fewer people than we have here in Tennessee. They are producing over $2 billion of a product, making over $400 million a year in tax revenue that we could use right here in our state for healthcare, education, clean water, you name it. And in Colorado, they're producing a safe product on their farms that give their family farmers a crop to grow, that doesn't have any fentanyl in it, that robs the market from the cartels. And I think that there's a lesson for us to be learned here in Tennessee. We should stop locking up primarily black and brown Tennesseans for small drug offenses. Just like the president earlier this week said that he was going to pardon simple marijuana offenses at the federal level, I think we should stop locking up primarily black and brown Tennesseans for small drug offenses, and I would commit to pardoning state convictions for simple marijuana offenses. And I think that's an important criminal justice aspect that needs to be talked about.
Very good. Returning to the economy for a moment, I believe Tennessee has 9 economically distressed counties. That's a tough nut to crack. People have been working on that for a while, and I don't know that we're any closer to bringing prosperity to those places in Tennessee than we were past years. What would you do?
Again, I don't mean to repeat this prescription, but I think it's the key. We need great K through 12 education and workforce development. We need access to health care in rural Tennessee. Without access to health care, businesses are not going to come to town. No one's going to come and drop their plant or their shop or their factory when the nearest ER is 85 miles away. Not going to happen. And so we need to stop being pig-headed about this and take the $1 billion or so a year that the federal government has been trying to give us every year for the last decade and use that money to decrease the number of uninsured Tennesseans. When you have more payers in a community, fewer uninsured people, then it becomes possible for healthcare to come back to that town. And that has got to happen if we're going to grow the economies in rural Tennessee.
Is that realistic, all of those rural hospitals coming back to life?
It's the best way to get there in the shortest amount of time. You have to have more money in the system. And look, there's not one solution that's going to fix it all. But we're going to talk about developing telehealth resources. We're going to talk about getting more people insured, and that's where you start the conversation. But Governor Lee, in 2018, healthcare was identified as the #1 problem in the state, and he said he had a solution that the private market was going to handle, and nothing has changed. In fact, the crisis has deepened.
Continuing on the economy, Tennessee began becoming a leader in the automotive industry under Governor Alexander about 30 years ago, I think now, and we are poised to become the leader in the country for electric car production. And that's because of a lot of support from the administration, among others. What would those relationships look like under your administration?
Look, I think it's very important to support the business environment in the state of Tennessee. It's what allows us to generate the prosperity that we can use to take care of one another. And I certainly don't want to interrupt that. I think it's important that we are talking about not only great automotive jobs coming to town, but green automotive jobs, right? So we are at the tip of the spear when it comes to this electrification of our auto fleet, and that's something we need to tout. And that kind of flexes a little bit into my environmental policy, which we can discuss if you want to. But since we're talking about big business developments, big auto plants across the state, I think it's important that we also talk about supporting the people who work at those auto plants. We need to support organized labor in the state of Tennessee. I understand that organized labor is the entity that's brought us the 40-hour work week, safety in the workplace, retirement with dignity. And so I think we need to support organized labor. I think the right to work for less, the right to get fired at will laws in this state are not fair to our workers and should be repealed. I definitely don't think we should codify right to work in the Constitution, and so we feel very strongly that we need to oppose Amendment 1.
Okay, so I do want to talk environment. And talking about the cars is a good pivot because folks from the TVA have told us that Tennessee is going to need to double its supply of electricity over the next couple of decades. And they've got to figure out how to do this at the same time as they're shutting down some of their coal-fired plants. Where does that fit into your vision for the environment?
So TVA right now is working on transitioning to a bridge fuel, getting away from coal and moving towards more natural gas. And they're going to spend probably $20 billion over the next 2 decades making that transition. There's data and studies out there that show that if they spent a large part of that same amount of money on investing in renewables, we'd be able to get the same output, but a much cleaner, greener energy mix. And I think I would definitely be lobbying TVA to the extent of my ability to green up their mix as much as possible, especially if it's delivering the same energy output. I do think we need to be investing in solar, and I want to share an example, if I might, about how I've seen solar transform communities. I was up on the 95 county tour in northwest Tennessee, Lake County. Driving through Lake County, and we're seeing these barns, and every little barn has a 10 kilowatt hour panel dotting the roof. It struck me as unusual because I had not experienced that in other parts of rural Tennessee. So I asked the mayor about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, we got a grant, and these little solar panels paid for themselves in 3 years." And then the farmers liked the idea of getting, free electricity, in their barns. And so the mayor told me, if you save a farmer $1, you got their attention. So the community fired up about solar, went and bought several thousand acres, and they had a power plant scale solar installation recruited to their community. That business came in, installed a 200 megawatt installation, selling the power for a profit to TVA. With the property taxes from that installation, that community was able to supplement and add on to their school buildings. And in those school buildings, they're teaching kids how to go out and then manage those solar farms. And so from this green energy initiative, they got green energy, they got educational opportunities, they got jobs in their community that are keeping their kids in their county rather than going off to the cities. And I'm like, this is the power of green energy. This is the power of creative government. And I was really uplifted that day.
That sounds cool. TVA also is one of the leading providers of nuclear energy. Do you see more nuclear energy in Tennessee's future?
So, I'm actually having conversations with content experts about this very issue. There are some emerging technologies with smaller nuclear reactors, and it's definitely something that I need to learn about, something I'm open to learning about. Again, I think the cleaner the energy mix, the more renewable we can make it, the better off we'll be, though.
Would you consider yourself a proponent of all of the above energy policy or a more restrictive energy policy?
We have a really high demand for energy to match the growth in this state. And so I think it's, there's not going to be one solution that fixes the problem. But again, what I can promise you is that I will bring common sense, compassion, and a data-driven response to answering this problem.
Very good. So a little bit more on your environmental policy. One of the things that we're really interested in here at the Tennessean is landfills. And as far as we can tell, the state doesn't seem to have a single coordinated plan around landfills. The landfill here in Nashville is almost full. There's a proposal to build a massive new landfill complex outside of Columbia, which the local legislators there are opposed to. citing Flint, Michigan, and Camp Lejeune scenarios
Water
as quite
issues.
possible, yeah. We've got rural communities that have been the site, like Camden, Tennessee, that have been the site of some big landfill problems. But the trash has to go somewhere.
That's right.
So saying there shouldn't be any landfills anywhere is not a realistic solution. Have you given that much thought?
Yeah, this is probably not a profile and courage moment, but I'm not ready to tell you where the landfill needs to go. But here's the thing. I think we need to approach this the same way I would approach other decisions, the same way I approach life-threatening conditions in the ICU. I surround myself with people, with content experts, and I get multiple opinions, and we decide a path forward together. That's what we need to do in a situation like this.
What else should we know about your environmental policy?
Well, I mean, I think it's something that we need to take care of our state parks and keep them accessible to everyone, and that means supporting them with the staff to keep them safe and functional. And I think.
Do you think they're understaffed in state parks?
I've heard. I don't have like specific data about how many people we need to hire, but I've heard people that I've interviewed in the state park system who've told me they could use some more help. And we can't throw a dollar at every single problem, but I think we need to have conversations about how we are good stewards of the land, and I'm certainly willing to do that.
We're closing in at the end of our time here. I want to give you the opportunity to tell our audience anything that we haven't spoken about today.
Well, I just want to tell you that, again, after traveling every corner of the state, I am so uplifted, and really my heart feels full, knowing that there are so many good people across the state fighting for what's best for working Tennesseans. And we believe in our campaign that no matter the color of your skin, your zip code, how much money you have in the bank, who you choose to love, or what your native tongue is, that Tennessee should be the land of opportunity for you. And there are a lot of people out there who share that vision, and that's why we're going to beat Governor Bill Lee next month.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for spending time with us today and our audience. Good day.
Thank you so much.